The air hung heavy in Claire's small apartment. Silence pressed in from all sides, broken only by the rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. It was a night like any other, quiet and unremarkable.
Softly, finally some peace and quiet.
Claire, curled up on the sofa with a book, welcomed the solitude. Her apartment, nestled in a quiet building on a tree-lined street, was her sanctuary. It was a place where she could shed the anxieties of her day and simply exist. Tonight, the silence was a soothing balm, a welcome reprieve from the city's usual cacophony. The only light in the room emanated from the small lamp on the end table, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The hands of the clock inched closer to midnight. Claire, lost in the pages of her novel, barely noticed the time slipping away. She was engrossed in a particularly gripping passage, the outside world fading into insignificance.
Suddenly startled. What was that?
A sudden noise, sharp and jarring, shattered the peaceful quiet. Startled, Claire looked up, her heart pounding in her chest. It was her phone, ringing with an unfamiliar urgency. She stared at the illuminated screen, a shiver crawling down her spine. The number flashing on the display was her own. Confusion warred with fear as Claire reached for the phone. Why would her own number be calling her at this hour? A million possibilities, each more unsettling than the last, raced through her mind. Hesitantly, she brought the phone to her ear, her breath catching in her throat.
Whispering, hello?
The line remained silent for a moment, the silence pregnant with unspoken dread. Then a voice, distorted and distant yet eerily familiar, broke the quiet.
Claire.
The voice rasped, sending chills down her spine. Claire gripped the phone tighter, her knuckles turning white. The voice, though distorted, held a haunting echo of her own, sending a shiver of unease through her. Fear, cold and clammy, began to spread through her like a creeping shadow. Who was this, and how did they know her name, her number? A million questions swirled in her mind, each unanswered, each fueling her growing terror. The voice on the other end of the line chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that sent goosebumps erupting across her skin.
Don't you recognize your own voice, Claire?
The voice purred, a mocking lilt to its tone. Claire's breath hitched, her mind reeling. The voice, though distorted, held an undeniable resonance to her own. It was like listening to a warped reflection, a twisted echo of herself.
Choking out. Who is this?
Fear tightened its grip, constricting her chest, stealing her breath. The voice on the other end sighed, a sound laden with a strange mix of weariness and impatience.
It's me, Claire. Or rather, it's you. From another reality.
Claire's mind struggled to grasp the words, to make sense of the impossible. Another reality? It sounded like the plot of a science fiction novel, a fantastical tale spun for entertainment. But the fear, the chilling familiarity in the voice on the other end was all too real. A cold dread settled in the pit of her stomach. This was no prank, no cruel joke. This was something far stranger, far more terrifying than she could have ever imagined.
You think I'm crazy, don't you?
The voice continued, a hint of amusement lacing its tone.
But it's true. We're connected, you and I. Two sides of the same coin, living separate lives in diverging realities.
Claire could only listen, her mind a maelstrom of fear and disbelief. The voice on the other end continued, revealing intimate details of Claire's life, things only she could know. Childhood memories, secret dreams, hidden anxieties, all laid bare by a voice that sounded eerily like her own. It was a surreal, terrifying experience, like being haunted by a ghostly reflection of herself. With each shared secret, the impossible became more and more real. The voice, her voice, spoke of a life that mirrored her own, yet diverged in subtle, unsettling ways. A life where choices had different outcomes, where happiness and sorrow took on different forms. Claire listened, trapped in a nightmare that was quickly becoming her reality. The cozy familiarity of her apartment felt cold and alien, the silence now thick with unseen eyes and unheard whispers.
I'm tired, Claire, tired of this life, this reality. Let me switch places with you, please.
A chill ran down Claire's spine. Despite the warmth of her apartment, the voice, pleading and desperate, painted a picture of a life she couldn't begin to comprehend. A life filled with unspecified hardships, an existence the other Claire desperately sought to escape. The request, as absurd and terrifying as it seemed, held a strange, unsettling sincerity. Claire wanted to hang up, to sever the connection with this eerie echo of herself. But something, perhaps a morbid curiosity or a sliver of empathy, kept her rooted to the spot, phone clutched tightly in her hand.
Why? Why me? Why would you want my life?
The question hung in the air, a silent plea for understanding in the face of the unexplainable. Pause to ES. The room fell into a suffocating silence as Claire's mind raced. grappling with the surreal conversation she was having. The voice on the other end seemed to grow fainter, as though it was being pulled away by some unseen force. Suddenly, Claire heard a faint noise. It was almost imperceptible at first, a soft rhythmic tapping that seemed to come from the hallway outside her apartment. Pulse of 1S. Claire's heart pounded in her chest as she strained to listen, every muscle in her body tensing with fear. She slowly turned her head towards the hallway, her eyes wide with trepidation. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, echoing through the quiet of the night. It was then she saw it, a shadow. It moved slowly, deliberately, casting an eerie silhouette against the dim light filtering through the crack under the door. Pause 2F. With bated breath, Claire took a hesitant step towards the hallway, her mind a whirl of questions and dread. The shadow seemed to shift, elongating and then shrinking as if it were alive, a dark entity with a will of its own. Claire's pulse quickened, her sense of reality slipping further away with each passing second. What was it? Who was it? Was it connected to the voice on the phone, or was it something entirely different? Pause 1S. She reached the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. The tapping stopped abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed down on her like a physical weight. Claire hesitated, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She could feel the presence on the other side of the door, a cold, malevolent force that seemed to seep through the very walls. Pause 2. Yes. Gathering her courage, Claire flung the door open, her eyes scanning the darkened hallway. Nothing. It was empty. The shadow gone, as if it had never existed. But the sense of unease lingered, an invisible shroud that wrapped around her, whispering of things unseen and unknown. Claire stepped back, closing the door with a shudder. The phone in her hand buzzed again, and the voice returned, more desperate than before. Pause at once. Claire, please, switch places with me, before it's too late. Pause 2S. The plea echoed in her mind as she stared into the darkness, the shadow's memory etched into her soul. What would she do? Could she trust the voice, or was it leading her into a trap? The questions swirled around her, unanswered and unanswerable, as she stood alone in the silence, the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. Pause 2S. The plea echoed in Claire's mind, a haunting refrain that refused to be silenced. She stood in the darkened room, the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. As she tried to steady her breathing, her eyes wandered, searching for anything that might offer a clue. Pause 1S. It was then that she noticed something odd, a faint outline in the wall, barely visible in the dim light. Claire's curiosity piqued, and she approached the wall, her fingers tracing the barely perceptible lines. Now pause 1C. With a sudden surge of determination, she pressed against the outline, feeling a slight give. A hidden door swung open with a creak, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Claire hesitated, her mind racing with questions and fears, but something compelled her forward. She descended the stairs, each step echoing in the confined space. Pause 1S. At the bottom, she found herself in a small, dusty room filled with old, mysterious items. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with ancient books, faded photographs, and strange artifacts that seemed to hum with a dark energy. She picked up an old, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. As she flipped through it, she began to uncover the dark history of the house. Pause 1S. The journal spoke of rituals, sacrifices, and a malevolent force that had plagued the house for generations. Claire's hands trembled as she read the final entry, a desperate plea for help from the previous occupant. Pause 1S. The realization hit her like a cold wave. She was not the first to experience this terror, and she might not be the last. The phone buzzed again, the voice more urgent than ever. Claire, please, switch places with me, before it's too late. The words sent a shiver down her spine as she looked around the hidden room, the dark history of the house pressing in on her. Could she find a way to break the cycle? Or was she doomed to repeat the same fate? The shadows seemed to close in around her, whispering of secrets and lies. Gathering her resolve, she stepped back towards the staircase, the journal clutched tightly in her hand. The weight of the unknown was heavy, but she knew she had to face it head-on. Claire's mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. She reached the top of the stairs and closed the hidden door behind her, sealing the darkness away for now. The shadows might be hidden, but they were always there, waiting. And as Claire stood alone in the silence, she knew she had to confront them, no matter the cost. Could she break free from the house's dark history, or would she become another lost soul, trapped by its malevolent force? The questions swirled around her, unanswered and unanswerable, as she faced the unknown with a heart full of fear and determination. Claire's heart pounded as she stepped away from the hidden room. The journal clutched in her trembling hands. The house seemed to breathe around her, its dark history pressing in on all sides. She moved cautiously through the hallways, the shadows seeming to follow her every step. Suddenly a figure emerged from the darkness, causing Claire to gasp and stumble backward. It was a stranger cloaked in shadows, their face obscured. The stranger raised a hand, a gesture of peace. "Claire," the stranger's voice was low and urgent, "you must listen to me. I've been watching. This house, it's a trap, a prison for souls. You are in grave danger. The voice you hear, the shadows you see, they are all part of the house's curse. You must find a way to break free. There is a ritual, a way to sever the house's hold on you, but it is dangerous and requires great strength. Do not waste it." With that, the stranger began to fade, their warning echoing in the air. "Remember, Claire, the answers lie within the house. Find them before it's too late." Claire took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She had to find the truth, to break the curse that bound her to this haunted place. Claire's breath was shallow as she approached the heart of the house, the journal's cryptic instructions guiding her steps. Each page revealed more of the ritual, a sinister dance of words and symbols. The house seemed to react to her every move. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. She reached a grand, decrepit room. In the center stood an ancient, ornate mirror. Claire's heart pounded as she stepped closer, reciting the incantation. The room responded, shadows writhing. The mirror's surface rippled, a figure materializing. Claire recognized the malevolent spirit. "You dare to challenge me?" it boomed. Claire continued the ritual, her voice growing stronger. The spirit lunged forward. Claire stumbled backward, clutching the journal tightly. With determination, she shouted the last line. The spirit shrieked, its form writhing. The air crackled with energy, shadows recoiling. The spirit was drawn back into the mirror. The room fell silent. Claire had done it. She had faced the source of the house's malevolence and emerged victorious. But the journey was not yet over. The house still held many secrets. Claire took a deep breath. She would uncover its secrets and break its curse. The final confrontation had been won, but the battle was far from over. She rose to her feet, ready to face whatever horrors lay ahead. The house had chosen her, but she would be the one to end its reign of terror once and for all. Pause 2S. Claire stood in the now silent room, her heart still racing from the confrontation. The ancient mirror, now just a reflective surface, stood as a testament to her victory. But victory felt hollow. She could still feel the house's presence, like a predator watching its prey. Pause 2S. She sank to the floor, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on her. Tears welled up in her eyes, a mix of relief and lingering fear. She had faced the malevolent spirit and survived, but the house's secrets still loomed over her. Pause 1S. Claire's mind raced, replaying the events of the night. The journal, the incantation, the spirit, each piece fit together like a twisted puzzle. But there were still gaps, unanswered questions that gnawed at her. Pause 2S. She knew she couldn't leave. Not yet. The house had chosen her, and she would not let its curse claim another soul. She wiped her tears, a newfound resolve hardening within her. Pause 1S. Slowly she rose to her feet, her gaze fixed on the mirror. It was over for now, but she knew the house's malevolence was far from vanquished. There were more secrets to uncover, more battles to fight. Pause 2S. Claire took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She would not rest until the house's curse was broken, until every shadow was banished. The final confrontation had been just one chapter in a much larger story. Pause 1S. As she turned to leave the room, a cold breeze brushed past her, whispering secrets she couldn't yet understand. She paused, her heart skipping a beat. The house was not done with her, not by a long shot. Pause 2S. With one last glance at the mirror, Claire stepped into the hallway, ready to face whatever horrors awaited her. The battle was far from over, and she would not rest until the house's reign of terror was ended once and for all.